All right, so ready to get started then? Okay, so call this meeting to order at 5:06. First up is taking a look at the December 7th minutes, which 2 out of 3 of us had not read prior to the last meeting. Anything there that needs to be changed, Carol or Jen? Carol?
Wait, am I unmuted? Okay. Just on the December 7th minutes, under the first paragraph, discussion of the 2022 policy committee meeting dates. I think it should be changed to Ms. Guernsey stated she may have a personal conflict. And then, however, she stated she will try to work around it if necessary. So that's just kind of clarifying where I was with that. And then in the next sentence about Yom Kippur, I mean, it's just not really accurate. I don't think it begins on October 5th. It's just, it begins at sundown. I mean, I don't know. That's not really the right language. But those were the only changes that I had.
I don't.
Because it doesn't start on October 5th. Isn't it? It was the night of the 4th.
Oh, no, yeah, it starts on the 4th.
Yeah, right. So that's sundown, or I mean, it just isn't. Anyway.
All right, well, so the second sentence certainly factually should be changed to reflect that it begins on October 4th.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, I got those changes. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen.
Sure.
Anything else for December 7th? And suddenly Jen is not on my screen anymore.
No, I don't have anything, Jen.
Okay. All right, so 3-0 on that.
Yep.
Okay. And the next set of minutes for January 4th. Any edits? Jen?
Nope.
Okay. 3-0 on that?
Yep.
Okay, so there we go. So now that brings us to the review of the C19 policies. And I just figure we should start with Mike in terms of, well, again, just actually, do we have any members of the public on?
We have one member.
Okay, so, you know, and of course it's recorded anyway. So just to be clear, this was something we set into place way back when. There were a couple of errors on the website, but that has now been, I believe, if it's not fully updated, it's on its way. And so now the decision that was sent from Board of Ed leadership to policy was to consider, now that we have bought the window until February 15th for these policies, what do we want to recommend to the meeting of the 15th for a one and done vote by the full board on what will continue after the 15th. So with that in mind, unless Carol or Jen, you have any questions, I figure, Mike, I'd turn it over to you to see what staff is recommending.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Let me give our recommendation and give you a brief update on what we've done since the board's meeting on Thursday. So we did meet this morning with Mr. Cleary and Ms. Mitchell of the Health Department for their thoughts on ways of going forward. Shared with them that the board had committed to the policies through February 15th, but there was concern with extending them past that. Also discussed with them the idea of a mask optional idea. While that's not stated specifically in the C19 policies, I know that that's a question that has come up, just to get their feedback on that and how we would prepare for that. Again, I want to state that the administration is in favor of a mask optional policy. And so we talked about how that might impact other mitigation strategies and such, and I'll get into that in a second if the policy committee wants me to get into it. But essentially, where we are is we are planning, we are meeting with the district leadership team tomorrow in the afternoon to go over a review of what the expectations are and are not for mitigation strategies in the school. We've started a document to collect both administrator questions as well as declarations that we're putting out to the DLT about what is not, should not be done. Once that is completed with the DLT, we will share that with the entire staff as well as with the families in the community. So we are preparing essentially for the end of the C-19 policies. As we discussed on Thursday, we know, I think we all agree here, but I won't get ahead of the committee, that the attendance policy as it relates to COVID-related absences needs to continue at least through the end of the school year. The green cleaning policy has already been adopted. We are pulling back on the, our visitor signs are down at the schools. We've opened up.
When you say visitor signs, you mean the no visitors?
The no
sign?
visitor signs. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. To clarify, the no visitor signs are down at the schools. We are expecting to still follow a 3-foot social distancing requirement. So, but we are going to hold and make clear to the administrators that all assemblies, anything should be able to go forward with that mitigation strategy in place. So we're moving forward in our communications to the administrators. A lot of this stuff, as I think, as you know, has been already happened. Some of it was pulled back on the last month, but there clearly has been a question of consistency across the schools. So this is all being addressed, and we should be finalized with this by the end of the week in anticipation that the policies expire on the 15th.
So,
Oh,
So
one
what
more
you're-
thing. I'm sorry, Ms. Maxicali. One more thing. We are putting together, I've asked for some representation from PTA Council to work with a few of our administrators in a small group to identify what other concerns are so that we can gather some parental input and make sure that we're kind of hitting every question or concern that's out there. I'm sorry, I forgot that piece.
So the point being of pulling in some parent stakeholders to help with this transition plan.
Yes.
Okay.
And one other piece, we are also working our social work, school psychologists. We're asking leadership in central office to develop talking points for students and staff on how to address this change in practice. As we've talked about many times, this is the reality that many of our students experience for a long time, particularly around the mask option piece. So if and when that goes away, we'll be prepared on how to help staff address student concerns, how to help parents address their child's concerns, and also how just maybe some talking points for students with each other. Because we anticipate that in the absence of a mask requirement, there will be some students who are concerned. There'll be families that are concerned, and we want to help to transition them through that process as well. And we want students to be always respectful of each other's choices, mask or no mask. So we want to be able to support our staff through that piece as well.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the ones then that you are recommending that we bring forward, that would need to be C-19-1 and 19-8, correct?
I'm sorry, I'm just pulling up that website. I didn't have it open right yet. Yes, 8 is the attendance and 1.
And that's it. And again, essentially the purpose of C-19-1, besides the overview language, is it's the date of expiration, and then specifically attendance, and then letting everything else expire as of the 15th.
Yeah, no, the only, I believe that is the only policy with a date, right? So if we take the others out, they revert back. Essentially the yellow highlighted language disappears, and we return to the base policy on which it was based.
That is my understanding as well. So with that said, Carol and Jen. I wish I could get you both on the screen at the same time.
I can
Jen?
I can see all of you, Jen. So it must be the way you have your, go up to your right-hand layout button.
Yeah, I thought I had, it's in grid view, but I can only see 6 people at a time. For some reason, you're on page 2.
I've got 16 here.
All right, well, I don't. Well, in any case, Jen, do you want to go ahead?
No, Carol had her hand up, so go ahead, Carol.
So this might be a question for Mike, but what date would he want to extend this to? Because you know, we were talking about the end of the year, but then we have summer programs as well. So what are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, thank Ms. Guernsey. It's a good question. And I'm gonna, Dr. Parrish, if I make a mistake on this, you will correct me, but the attendance as far as the state of Connecticut is concerned, is a school year issue.
Correct.
So I think if you picked, to be safe, watching the forecast, right? If you pick June 30th, for example, that would give us leeway in case we have to add more snow days at the end of the school year.
Okay.
I don't think we have to worry about summer.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So my question on C19-1, Jen, would be, since we're only carrying or proposed to carry one policy forward, this policy, this C19-1 is plural in nature. So would it not need to be edited to just recognize the one policy, the one amendment to the one thing, if that's the one that you guys want to carry forward?
Yeah, I don't have a
Because this,
reaction to that. I mean, the only reason not to make it singular is if we anticipated the possibility of anything happening this spring, which I think none of us are considering or almost to the point of being open to. So I would agree. I'm just looking through seeing.
I mean, my question really then becomes, do you want to keep this as broad as it is in regards to laws, rules, guidance?
Well, I guess the only thing that I appreciate it is otherwise I think you need some preamble language establishing what these are and how they expire and having to insert that into 19.8. So I'm not looking to do anything that radical of language movement. I mean, or we could simply say yellow language, expires as of June 30th, figuring that at this point, everyone knows why this has been put in. I could go either way. So
C19-1B has a January 30th date. You're going to put June 30th in there
right.
and then change the second paragraph
To July 1st.
to July 1st.
That's right. And obviously, actually, even these dates are wrong since we already extended them to February 15th.
Correct.
But so that to me was just the neatest way to do it. And I wouldn't even care, and obviously, the stickler I am, I wouldn't even care about leaving it plural only because it's kind of serving as a historical marker. And so that even though there's only one, I mean, obviously it's going to be odd because the other one is 0.8. So it's obvious that it had been in the company of others. And I don't want to let myself off the hook and say that I'm being lazy because I'm not. I'd have no problem leaving it, changing the date and going forward with that. Carol?
I don't have any problem with that either, but I would want for at the bottom of, what is it, page 8 on our agenda. So it's like the C19.1B. I would want that to reflect all of the changes to.
Right. Well, this date was accurate to the January. So the point being, this is in fact not the most up-to-date version of the policy. So absolutely, yes, it does need to have in there what was that, January 28th?
I don't know if there was an October date too. I mean, I have to go back and check, but
This does have an October date.
You what?
It has October 26th. Are you opening the information that we got in an email this afternoon from Kristen?
Yes, but let me just open it again to see if I opened up a previous one by accident. Hold on, let me see.
This one has a final date of October 26, 2021 at the bottom of page 8.
Is
to
this
have-
the one from 9:43 this morning? Okay, let me see. I think that.
No, it was later than that. It was one.
Oh,
to seven.
It was like 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. You're right. Okay.
But to your point, Carol, yes, the
Yeah.
dates need to be accurate, and that we would be changing by vote the two dates that are in the second to last and last paragraph.
Thank you. I'm just not sure.
So yeah, it should say January 28th, 2022. And then the next one will become, if it passes, February 15th, 2022 after that.
Was this email from Kristen then? The one at one?
Yes.
Could one of you forward that to me? I don't know why it's not in my inbox.
Sure.
Thank you.
Although, actually, I'm looking at the email from 9:43.
Yeah, sorry, 9:43 as well. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
that is the one I was, okay, never mind. I
Yes.
have that one. I thought you said it was, okay.
Must have been something else at 1 o'clock.
No, that's, I just want to make sure I'm looking at the same document. Okay.
So there's
All
going to be
right, I got that.
date there of January 28th, 2022. And then there will end up being another one, should it pass, of February 15th, 2022.
Okay.
Now, the only question I have in here that I have is on we throw a lot of words in here. So if we go into the second paragraph,
Of which policy?
1,
Okay.
A, and it says, education, whatever, to educate students in accordance with the law. You see the parentheses that says number 2 and then preserve number 3.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so you see where it says 2, adhere to all applicable laws, rules, and guidance.
Yep.
So it doesn't sound like you're asking for 2 to carry forward, but that was conflicting language with 2, which where we had put into consider guidance, because not all guidance is required. It's voluntary unless it says it's a requirement. So I don't want to put in limiting language here that we're necessarily going to adhere to things that are optionally.
That's a great point.
So I would want to change 2 to adhere to maybe just adhere to requirements or whatever, but to limit it to that. But whatever language you'd like to craft here, but I wouldn't want to carry forward, adhere to all this. First of all, we've got guidance that's lapsed and it hasn't been updated. There's a whole bunch of mess with that. And guidance isn't necessarily a requirement. So
No, I agree with that. So just simply adhere to all applicable laws and rules. Although I'm not sure what a rule is in this case either.
well, the mask order itself is a rule.
Isn't that an order?
It's an order by the governor for the commissioner of public health to issue a rule. So the
I actually didn't know the second part of that. It was only the first part I knew.
right. So
The rule is the appropriate term.
Yeah, I assume the lawyers who wrote this policy were talking about the mask rule. So anyways, I don't know how you want to do it, Jen, but something like adhere to all requirements and just leave it at that or whatever, because requirements we don't really have an option on. But everything laws, however you want to put it. I just don't want to put guidance in here because that's not necessarily required.
Nope, I agree with you. I'd be fine with adhere to all applicable laws and rules.
Required rules.
But as you just defined it, that's where I'd be fine with the word mandates instead. Because mandate is clear what it means. The rule you're saying is what covers the mask mandate, but I would be fine then with applicable laws and mandates.
Yeah, it's hard to put words in here, right? Because sometimes they use order or mandate, rule. I mean, we're trying to cover our bases here.
Okay, then we can add the adjective required. I was trying to keep it cleaner than that, but I know what we intend. So if we just want to be that much more explicit, then fine.
So adhere to all applicable laws, required laws and rules. Are you good
Yeah.
with that? So did you get
Perfect.
that, Kristen? Number 2, adhere to all applicable required laws and rules, strike and guidance.
But don't strike the semicolon.
Right, got it.
Just want to say. Okay, no, that's a good change. Thank you. Anything else? Now, the only other thing that I had even considered, because and I mentioned this at the board meeting, the only strength to me of 19.2 is that, and not that Mike isn't already doing this, but it does have that final paragraph, the administration providing appropriate notice of protocols. That was, to me, is the only important sentence in 19.2, but I'm fine with just the broad sweep of getting rid of them all and trusting that administration knows we have that expectation, but I just feel the need to bring that up.
Correct.
Which I'm looking for a reaction of a thumbs up, we do need that, or thumbs down, we don't. It can go, we know that staff will do this. Again, I'm fine with letting it go, but I don't want to not discuss it.
I don't think we need it.
Okay. And my final, and I'm assuming, Jen, if you disagree, you'll jump in. The only other thing I do want to double check on is where we are having lunch located. Because the allergy policy, life-threatening food allergy policy, does come with a stipulation of the cleaning in those non-cafeteria areas. Is lunch happening outside of the cafeteria at this point? Dr. Savajanzik is saying no.
It's happening in the gym, I thought.
That's what I'm checking.
At the middle school and high schools, we're pulling back into the cafeteria.
And you do, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, do you mean you're pulling back now, or you would?
Yeah, we are starting that process right now.
Oh,
Okay, so by the 15th, there will be no one who's in a gym, and we don't foresee going back there, because that was one of my only concerns with that specific policy, was the language about the cleaning in the non-cafeteria areas.
Yeah, no, well, we will be done with the gyms. Our goal would be not to ever go back there. Right? I've long given up on predicting the future, but yes, that is our intent.
the schools that have the outdoor spaces, will they still be available or no?
They will. We talked today about the tents, and when the weather turns and we're past this kind of worry about weather, we'll put the tents back up. But on nice days, we can, we'll start to see some nice days. Hopefully in February, we can, the Ward Courtyard and those other areas will be accessible to students.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add, and this I would just kind of put on central office staff's radar, if as part of the task force transition group, there's discussion that with, again, in the hope that masks are coming off, that if to allow more spacing is something that is determined would be, we'd like the space to be available to them. And if there's any parental concern about wanting that space and therefore wanting gym to be back, I understand masks that will pull them back, great. But if as part of unmasking, they would like that additional space to expand into for whatever reason, as part of the transition, if we know that by the 15th, we can add it to the agenda, and it's simply going to have to be that it's coming up without having been through a policy committee vote. But I don't necessarily want to recommend that right now, because I'd be interested in staff's input on that. Carol?
I just have a question about that, because I mean, clearly unmasking is already happening during lunch. So that should be the one area where we wouldn't see a difference in terms of requiring a change. I'm just trying to understand that thought process, Jen.
With everyone, again, this is a pure comfort level. I'm not saying that there is any science behind what I am bringing up. This is about comfort level solely. And the thought of everyone walking around, if that helps with that transition, because we are unmasked, that is the only reason I put that out there, not because of some science.
Gotcha.
Jen?
No, I'm just going back to C19-1, if you're ready to, for another comment on this. I
Well,
know,
can you first comment on the, are you okay with what I just said about the food issue and other space issue? That I'm fine with letting that go, but that if in conversation for the transition, it comes up as possibly being an issue, we might end up seeing or discussing it on the 15th.
Agreed.
yeah, I understand what you're saying. You mean, because we're going to let the food allergy thing policy go right now, but they might want to have something around that
Right.
continue.
In the course of the next 2 weeks, as this is, being discussed, if that comes up, I'm just kind of acknowledging that it might, and that it might actually end up being needed.
Yeah.
That's only so that they can eat in the classroom.
That
Or
was one of it,
gym.
but there's a specific language with, it could be in the classroom, and that in the elementary schools, then that has to be a school produced lunch. That was one part of it. The
Right.
other part of it involved expanding into gym space and the cleaning that is needed for those spaces if that happens. So these are two different parts.
I mean, is there an underlying thing in that policy, Jen? I don't think there is, that would preclude administration from using those spaces as, if they want to.
It's sort of, again, it's the idea of, if policy is supposed to be the board directing staff, this is just an explicit, we are directing staff and do not want to hear that this isn't happening kind of thing. That's really, look, lots of things in that's why so often policy can be very, very vague language, because you're trusting things to get done right. But this was something we put in specifically for a reason. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I mean, if it had to come back, Jen, personally, I don't think it should be any surprise to anyone on the board. They've seen this for 2 years. So I'm not really sure there'd be any problem with understanding the content.
I completely agree. And I also think understanding that it came from some committees meeting between today and the 15th, I don't think this is difficult. I'm just acknowledging it publicly.
Okay. Can I ask a question?
Sure, I had another policy to talk about, but you go ahead.
I'm back to 1.
Yep.
Mike, I know you're meeting with people about things. I don't know what that really entails, but is there anything in this, because what I'm interested in, if this is going to carry forward, is the constraint provision. And saying in terms of things that go on that are not in guidance, that are not in laws, that are not in that do happen, that are outside the bounds. In other words, the straying from guidance. So multiple examples, like, not speaking during snack, not speaking during lunch, whatever it may be. These things that have never been a piece of guidance that are being implemented. So if we need to put a statement in 1 that says, staff or whoever shall not do things that are not in what's required. I mean, I know we're putting this in here, but I think that for me, I think we need to be tramping down on the things that are not in guidance that are happening.
You
If that
could,
needs to be a
yeah.
directive from the board, then let's do that.
I think I hear what you're saying, Jen, and I'm not disagreeing. I think what I'm questioning is that could be a very long list,
Right.
right? And one of the things that we found is things that we did not even anticipate have happened, right? That there, and I think that would continue. So, what is there a way to make a statement around that says, that comes from, I don't know if I would put it in terms of coming from the positive, but mitigation strategies, all mitigation strategies will be directed by central office personnel or something along those lines, so that it tightens up on people's ability to freewheel out there on their own.
Yeah, I mean, if 2 takes care of it, if that amendment to adhere to all applicable, required applicable laws and rules covers us, meaning you're not going to stray from that, then that's fine. But I don't know if you need this to be even more prescriptive. So, I'm looking for.
No, I'm okay with that. We can highlight this with the leadership team starting to, renewing this with them tomorrow and continuing it over the next few weeks, and then obviously past the 15th or as needed. We can talk. I can talk to them tomorrow about what policy does not allow them to do.
Right. It's right. So these have kind of been looked at, you know, the flexibility, being able
Yep.
to, you know, be fluid, do what needs to be. I think we're shifting the perspective here of not straying.
And really, as we talked about it with Ms. Mitchell and Mr. Cleary this morning, we really came down to the fact that the mitigation strategies at this point, you know, assuming at some point mask optional, right? That then we're left with the distancing of 3 feet when possible,
Right.
right? And we're saying what we're going to be saying to the administrators tomorrow is that the instructional decisions overrule the mitigation decision. So in other words, if the best instructional decision is that kids should be working in groups, then kids should be working in groups, you know, at the rug or whatever it takes place. So it's down to the 3 foot distancing when possible. And then the other two things are really you know, again, with the state encouraging the vaccination as a mitigation strategy, encouraging the daily checklist. And we're going to let staff, if staff wish, you know, again, the idea of mask optional. And that's pretty much it. Like everything else is, you know, it's becoming, what we're working to do is simplify this as much as possible so there's fewer things to remember and say, this is it. This is what you got. That's your suite of mitigation strategies. And there's nothing else.
Right.
If that's helpful. And that's the message that will be given to the administrators and to the staff.
Carol?
Just a question, this might be for Mike. What is the expectation about distancing then for staff?
The distancing, well, it's kind of circumstantial, Carol, but the adult distancing should really continue to be 6 feet from each other and when possible, 6 feet from kids. But we're going to, you know, again, staff can take off masks and we're going to be telling them that when they take off masks, they have to be more mindful of their distancing.
So
Because
when we're talking about, you know, some of the special education meetings and things like that, one of the challenges in having those in person was that the adults wanted or needed, I'm not exactly sure, to be at 6 feet. Is that something that would be more flexible then,
Yes.
or would that be handled?
Yeah, like the thing that we've got to work on, because and we talked about this morning just among the executive directors, is for 2 years we've been saying the mitigation strategy takes precedent over the instructional strategy.
Right.
And now we're going back and saying, okay, we have to reframe ourselves. The mitigation strategy takes backseat to the instructional strategy.
And I would say also school climate too. I mean,
Yeah.
I understand the instruction piece, and that's the most important thing. That's like how we are, but just the climate of some spaces and
That's
how
right.
it impacts instruction itself. So,
But I would say, I think that what Mike has just said is a very, very, very big deal to hear that from our superintendent, and that the public needs to hear that. And this is, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, regardless of the mask mandate, that regardless of what the legislature does, you know, in 2 weeks, that we are moving towards this as the, you know, all of the other rules boil down to the instructional strategies trump the mitigation strategies, that the mitigation strategies, because everything else is within our control. Those mitigation strategies are as possible, but not, I mean, again, your perfect example. If you want to do group work, if that group work is supposed to be on the rug and that's what the teacher views as the best instructional model, then that's what they should be doing. And that's regardless of whether the mask is on or not. Am I correct about that?
That's correct. That's correct.
Because that is
We're not dependent on any change in the mask
right.
requirement to start implementing these changes. My only caution is that, you know, we're having a DLT meeting tomorrow. We're still working on the communication, so this doesn't all start tomorrow. Right. I'm sure as smart a group of people as we have in central office, we haven't thought of every what if, and more are to come. So we want to make sure that we're combing, you know, we're beating the bushes to get these out, and then get a clear communication out both to our staff, our teaching staff, our paraprofessionals, our administrators, as well as to the parents at once, so that there's an understanding of what's changing and how it's changing. And that goes back to, you know, again, this small group of people we want to have with a couple parents involved, just to again, make sure we're asking them to go out, collect the information, bring it back to us so that we're being sure that we're covering every possibility, because as you know, unfortunately, we've been surprised by some of the things that are happening out in the school, and we don't want that to happen again.
Right. So this is, you know, the parent code for this is return to normal, but we're coming at it educationally,
Right.
which is so that not that I don't like that phrase. I've used the phrase, but the way we are presenting it to staff now is do what is instructionally sound and of the best way to educate your students. And so I think that's, however you know, formalize that language, I think that's a really important part, because whenever you're unsure of what rule applies, that's the easier one to remember.
Right.
And to send out to staff. So, and yes, again, I will reiterate, there's going to be a lot that needs to be done about how this, from 12th graders, I'm not worried about. The kindergartners and first graders, I am.
Yeah.
And how staff talk to them and how they are coached and talking to each other is a huge part of this. So thank you for pulling parents in on that work, that transition work. So Jen, you raised the issue of the going rogue, and it's not that I worry that Mike would sanction going rogue, but are you anymore looking to have something language in here that's more stringent? And I give you the example that I think was last year or a year and a half ago. We did make that policy language change, that communication comes from the district and the district leadership. Are you looking for something like that, or are you satisfied with Mike's answer?
I mean, I want to be satisfied with Mike's answer, but there's a lot of other people involved. So, I mean, it's not a matter of Mike's answer. It's a matter of, does he feel and do we feel that we need to please be something more, and if we don't, we don't, that's fine. In here that basically is a do not stray policy provision, you know, I mean, don't stray. I mean, because this, you know, C19-2 is the one that has the enforcement mechanism in it, and we're not carrying that forward. So there really is no enforcement mechanism in C19-1 anyway.
Right. And that again, that was all part of the communication piece and that of 19-2. So
if he thinks that the required laws and rules covers us in terms of do not stray, then we're good.
And Mike, your answer once again?
I do think it's enough. I think that's fine. And again, we're committed to following this up with the administration, individually and collectively.
If something happens too, Jen, in the next 2 weeks, or Carol, I don't know. I mean, if we need to make some sort of a change on the 15th, I mean, we can make an amendment, you know.
Absolutely.
So if something comes back and it's, you know, mayhem or what have you, you know, we can fix it then too if we need to.
Yeah, and actually that also reminds me that with that language change, Kristen, if you can not use the highlight, but put the language itself in the type in red so that they are clear that we not only brought it forward, but that there was a language change within it, that red type will help make clear to the board what we've done.
Okay, got it.
Okay. If it's okay, I'd wanted to and I saw that Mr. Papa George was on the call, so I don't know if he will know the answer to this, but if you look at the transportation policy, I got to get to it again. Sorry, I left that page. The language regarding the bus transportation, the
bus stops may change.
Yeah, the allowing other students. Oh, damn it! I went too far.
In our regs, though, I don't know why that is necessary in the policy.
It's in both.
Right. I don't
because we wanted it in, so that's why it's there. What number? Do you have a page number, Jen? Because I just lost track of where I am.
For the transportation policy?
Yeah. There we go. Never mind, I got it. So this is on page 25.
Yeah, it's towards the end.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't this already in our regs under normal provisions anyway?
Well, if you look at the language right above it, could remember the discussion better. But I just didn't know how many students was this impacting. If by letting this expire, is this changing a situation for any of our students? You know, I mean, worse. Well, the only word worse is the wrong word to use here, but the negative scenario could be suddenly finds out on February 16th that they're not allowed on a bus anymore, when they had been counting on, when hoping for it for their walker. And I assumed Mr. Papageorge was the one I should direct this to.
Yeah, well, I can answer that. We would not allow that.
Say it again.
We would not, we would never pull a ride out. What we talked about this morning was essentially going back to full buses. And
Right.
we believe we will have, I mean, we can do an audit of this in a sense and look at where this is. And Mr. Papageorge is there, you can talk to Mr. Schneider about this, but I don't expect that we're going to have to take away a service for anybody who's been provided it all along.
Okay, that's all I wanted to check.
Yeah, I would not want to do that.
Jen, we have already got courtesy rides in 3541AR are already existing. When we put this into the C19, it was redundant.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember because we had a huge discussion about this. Not only that, I thought there was almost a motion to amend it at the board table.
Yeah, it was a redundant inclusion into the C19.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was because we just wanted to make sure it was in the C19 and not looking to the underlying policy, because it's in the AR right now. Courtesy rides have been in the AR on transportation since, I don't know, what is this?
Actually, I think what the change was here, I think with COVID, we took out the ability.
We did.
So
Initially.
this had been stripped in the original C19 policies, and one of our changes for the school year at the recommendation of staff was to put back in the potential for this.
Right. It's
So-
not needed. Yeah, it's not needed.
It's just got messy.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to check about that.
I have one on C19.8 though, the attendance. If we can go,
Great, give me a page number.
sure, I'm on transportation, so let me go up.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. Okay. So 18,
Page 18. Yep,
A.
yep.
I don't think anyone's getting a signed note from a medical professional who has evaluated the student, confirming the absence and giving an expected return date. I don't think that that's a practice that we're following.
I would agree. I don't think that's happening anymore.
No. No one is needing to give a note and all that. You just call in and do your thing.
But it acknowledges the reality of where we are.
So,
And that's not something, I think the only reason we would have had that in there is if it was something that was a request from Sands and Jill. This isn't something we were chasing down. So they've looked at this and they, again, clearly, if it's not the practice, let's deal with reality. But we weren't the ones who put this in here in the first place.
no.
So, Mike, they saw, I mean, obviously they would have looked at this and indicated that it should stay. Or at least they didn't advocate for it being removed. So I'm kind of curious about that.
Yeah, we're not making people do this, so it would be a violation of our policy to let them back into school without this note, then technically speaking.
Right.
And no
Right.
one's doing that.
The
Right.
better thing is to take it out. Right.
Right, take it out.
Okay, but my question is that, Mike, you said you met with Sands and Jill this morning, and maybe I'm assuming too much, but I was assuming as part of that they looked at this and did not advocate for that language to be removed. That's, now I'm not that I believe that they have to tell us our business, but the fact that they don't advocate for its removal would indicate they think it's happening. Or perhaps they just didn't
No,
look.
I think to use your words, I think you're assuming too much. They didn't go line. We did not go line by line through the policies.
Okay.
With them. You know, we talked in general terms, but I think what what I hear Ms. Jacobson saying is the reality that we've all been experienced, that there's, people can't, even if they wanted to, people can't get the notes. And I think for the most part, the doctor's offices have kind of not even, they may be confirming cases over the phone, but they're not going to write a note to that. So that's the reality we're in right now.
No, I agree. As I said, so that's where I was assuming too much that they had looked at this line specifically. So I'm fine with that. So then we need, if Jen, Carol, I'm assuming you're fine with it. We do need to strike that language in yellow. Correct?
Yep.
Carol, you're on mute. So Kristen, again to you, the language needs to stay yellow highlighted, but if you can put a red strike through all of it. Just the like, sorry, on page 18.
Right. Just, Jen, just the highlighted section gets a red strike through.
That's right.
So you're keeping the first part of that sentence, student illness must be verified by licensed medical professional and deemed excused regardless of the length of absence, and then it will be period,
That's semicolon.
semicolon, keep that in there? Okay,
Like a closed parentheses before the semicolon.
yes, thank you, Carol, saw it, got it,
Really?
thank you.
We don't have a closed parentheses now.
We do at the end of the yellow.
Oh, you're right. Okay, so Kristen, that's clear?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anything else before we vote?
Can I bring up one more thing on 8:19?
But of course.
Page 19, bottom yellow. Mike, is there any change in this paragraph that needs to happen?
I'm sorry, I'm looking online. What policy is that?
C19.8, it's the attendance policy. I'm on page 19 of the packet, bottom.
Which is also page C.
Page C.
Yeah, C19.8C, way at the bottom. The
Okay.
first part is you got to call the hotline. And then the second part is just any of this bit about absent. Are we still marking kids absent and then proving the attendance? Is that how this is still happening?
That's how it's still happening.
And how is that going?
It's going fine. I think that we've got high participation. I will tell you that, and this is based on just a side comment that Jill made this morning. And I haven't talked to specifically principals about this, but most of the kids are back in a day or two at this point. Absences are really confined now by the new guidance since the first of the year.
Wait,
Not even the 5 days.
I guess I just want to ask about that. If Jill's fine with it, I'm fine with it. Okay. Anything else, Jen?
22,
Yep.
periods of blended learning.
Wait, hold on. So Mike, that's page F.
I mean, just for anyone on the call, remember these were like passed in 2020. So we're just catching up language to be relevant to today. So including periods of blended learning, do you want to keep that in? I mean, we're not doing blended learning, are we? Well, I guess we are if you choose one of the options. So that should just stay in. Okay.
Yeah, I think so, just in
Okay.
case.
Okay. Okay. All right. That's all I had, Jen. Thank you.
Okay. Carol, anything else?
I'm good.
Okay, actually, sorry. There was one other thing in transportation I wanted to look at. I knew there was. This is on page 24.
Mm-hmm.
And again, question to Mike or to Angelus. This was regarding the fact of routes having to be changed because of absences and the notification to parents in advance of such changes. Is this not viewed as an issue anymore?
I was thinking about this sentence particularly in advance of the meeting because as we know, just in early January, we were dealing to some degree with, because of COVID absences related to drivers and things, right? Even just travel absences.
Right.
So, but our commitment has always been that if buses are screwed up, if they're running late or that type of thing, we use IC to message people. So that's been a past practice. And I think if the committee is comfortable and the board is comfortable, I think that this sentence alone doesn't justify keeping the policy. Because
Okay,
it's already been practice.
I'm fine with that. It's again, it's the strength of if it is needed or if
Yeah.
it is helpful. Because I do agree that we have had a past demonstration that pre-COVID, this is what would happen, but I felt remiss if I didn't bring it up.
Yeah.
Okay. So then that leaves us with, I believe, two language changes, correct? And the date changes. Carol and Jen, yes? Okay, so is that ready to vote? All in favor? And Jen, I couldn't, hold on, I'm having to switch screens again.
Yeah.
Jen, there we go. Okay, so 3-0 vote on that. So this will go forward to the full board on February 15th for a one and done vote. And again, knowing that this task force or whatever Mike ends up calling it, of pulling together some stakeholders of administration, parents, teachers, I certainly would hope, get, again, not a monstrosity of, too many voices and they get nothing done. But if something comes out of that discussion that needs to change what we've done here today for the 15th, we'll just expect people to be prepared to speak to that. And you're welcome, Ms. Vitale. Okay, so that's it. All right, so moving on, let me pop back up. Discussion of policy 6100. This is on here at the request of Mrs. Guernsey. So Mrs. Guernsey, I will let you take it.
Great, thank you. So this is just something I wanted to bring to the policy committee, and I'm not sure that it's appropriate for policy, but just for a discussion. I was thinking a little bit about scheduling, and specifically what had me thinking about this is the middle school schedule, where right now the presentation, the most recent presentation is showing that we're dedicating probably around 300 hours to this What I Need time. So I just started thinking about, board oversight and what it means to have a significant change to schedule. And, that could possibly impact curriculum, just thinking about sort of that magnitude, that number of hours, and also thinking about well, essentially about the curriculum, but the opportunities for curriculum or the decisions about curriculum, like looking at from a number of different ways. So I was trying to figure out even where this would fit into policy, because in fact, scheduling isn't something that's usually in policy, but I was kind of in terms of like, is this board overreach? Probably it might be, but in the same way that some of our grading policy probably might be. So just wanting to have that conversation and finding that it could fit under instruction general if we wanted to make, to sort of specify in that third paragraph, we talk about the superintendent of schools or designee shall present regular evidence of student progress and of program modifications. Would we want to add, for example, the language that says program and schedule modifications, just to make sure that there was a level of accountability if in fact that was something the board was interested in. So it's really an opportunity for discussion based on sort of the current situation, but imagining that it could be something that could impact really any level of instruction. So just wanting to know what your thoughts are on this. And I don't really have any concrete thoughts. I mean, I have so many questions still about the middle school schedule. I'm ready to embrace it if those questions are answered, but it gave me pause, and I wanted to, because they're not answered, to just address it with this group.
Jen? Jen, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was on mute. I'm processing. just got it, just
Yep.
heard the information. I'm generally favorable to it. I think that, we list in here things like personnel, equipment, instructional supplies and materials, but there's no notion of the resource of time. And we have that in our student day policy, because we have to meet that 900 hours, blah, blah, blah. But the allocation of what is probably one of our most vital resources, and that is of how we utilize our time. So I'm open. I mean, I don't think we're doing anything today, are we? I mean, yeah, it's just,
I would not be in favor today.
yeah.
No, I'm not either.
Okay.
I just more wanted to bring it up in this forum, and it might be that, anyway, just to hear what you would think.
I think time is a critical resource and how that impacts things. So I'm in favor of looking at it and getting some input on it.
And I would echo what Jen said. I wasn't sure, what exactly the suggestion was going to be. I guess my only question is, and I should say for the record that this isn't a reflection of current administration or even necessarily the most recent past administration, because we have always been presented with the information.
Right.
It's a matter of, do we want this to become, or to me, the discussion is take it to the next level. Do we want this to be a matter of board approval? Because it can be. Policy is how we direct the district. And so we at least have to have, if we're going to bring up the topic, then we might as well have the full discussion on, do we want to take it that far? Understanding that I think current administration has shown a sensitivity when the board doesn't support it, even though it's not a voting item, it has gone back and been reworked, which is something I enormously appreciate. But the idea of policy is that it's in place regardless of who the administration is. This could be for someone, years from now. And that, is this a direction that we think that the board should take with all of that in there? So I want to say, at least for me personally, this is not a reflection on current administration, because I appreciate the level of input, the presentations, the lengthy time that we have allocated to discussing this as a non-voting item, I'm very appreciative of. So I would agree. I'm happy to continue this conversation, but I think the conversation needs to be twofold, not just the presenting evidence of, but do we want to have something more than that? And I'm not advocating for one or the other, but I'm just indicating that I would want that as part of the discussion, because I would certainly expect that might be something. Well, I'll just leave it at that. So yes, so we'll have this as a future item, as something that we're going to come back to, and that when we do, Mrs. Guernsey, if I can charge you with coming up with, if not a single sentence, perhaps multiple options of language changes. And if you could please, CCing me, get them to Mr. Cummings ahead of time, just so that you can get some feedback. So we're not hearing, or you at least as the one making the motion to change this. The first time he's giving feedback is not at the policy committee. Is that okay? Mike?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on this because I think this is, I've talked before with the board around the need for some type of committee work around curriculum and instruction. And in my thinking of what that looks like, it's not simply, it wouldn't exist simply for the idea of passing curriculum or giving pre-approval to curriculum. I'm not thinking simply like an analogous process to policy committee, right? I think it's also a place to have these conversations around schedule or how we design our curriculum units, like what should be the essential components of a curriculum unit, our professional learning plans. I think it's that type of thing, so that we can help the board become more informed about how these pieces work together. And I think that my worry about any directive around X number of instructional minutes would be that doesn't acknowledge the differentiation that some students require, both
Sure.
For intervention and then for acceleration.
Mhm.
So I think that as we think about that, we have to, I guess my first thought would be, it's only one variable in what leads to effective schedule is a very important variable.
Yeah.
It's one of the most important variables, but it's only one variable in the equation that essentially leads to better student learning. And if we approach it only as a schedule or as instructional minutes, then we're missing those other key parts of the conversation. So I guess what I'm thinking is, and with the continued hope that we have some type of curriculum instruction committee, that to my mind, that's where this should start. Because I think that it requires a broader conversation than simply policy.
And
If
thank
that
you.
makes sense.
Yeah, and considering I'm the one who's bringing forward the amendment for starting the curriculum committee, it probably would have been good if that occurred to me too. So thank you for that reminder. And so we are, as Mrs. Vitale has kind of put the board on notice to expect the addition of a special meeting, possibly in February, although I don't think we've set a definitive date yet for that discussion of bylaws and bylaw amendments. So we'll still keep this, on the burner as a potential future item, but we'll hold to see what happens with that curriculum committee, what it's charged with ultimately, and that should be in place first. But that doesn't mean that this can't be part of policy. It still could be, but let's see it as what is actually going to be the machinations and the process for this. So thank you for that reminder, Mr. Cummings, again, of my own amendment. So is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be forwarding any specific language because I don't really have it. I just wanted to make sure it was something that, again, that we had a chance to discuss, even if it was briefly in policy, and to sort of hear what your thoughts were on it. So thank you. Thank you for that opportunity.
Okay.
And can I just add, I want to be really clear. We know as we've had this conversation, about the math challenge, just, this is the latest example that this has come up, that there have been issues around differences and inconsistencies among scheduled minutes at the elementary school, for example. And again, we know that knowing the value of what a schedule, that a good schedule can do to improve student achievement, there's work to be done. So I want to be really clear. We're not opposed to this idea at all, because I think that it offers guidance on how to strengthen a school and a school system's work with kids.
Okay. All right. So that's a to be continued. Taking a look next at the draft language here of 5118 for resident/non-resident school attendance in Fairfield Public Schools, where we didn't get, that was, as I recall, the potpourri kind of kitchen sink of all the language possibilities were put in. Am I correct about that, or am I misremembering this? Jen, wasn't this Frankenstein a bit?
It was completely Frankenstein.
Yeah.
It's still really Frankenstein-y.
Yeah.
And it needs a lot of work.
Right. Sorry,
Yes.
I just got to the page that was all red and green.
Jen, not to interrupt you at all. I just know there's people on the call, and do you want to wait to the end for that? I'm sorry. I just didn't know if you had because I know you can't see everyone. I didn't check
about the people. The problem is that I feel beholden to go in the order of the agenda.
Okay.
In case anyone's chiming in. So I do also know Mr. Cummings had let me know he is going to need to step out at 6:30. But if the public comment happens after that, I will be taking careful notes and forwarding that to him. And I will, to your point, Ms. Jacobs, and thank you for saying so, that the public should understand that the vote of the policy committee is just a vote in policy. So that doesn't make anything official. That is simply the recommendation to the full board. And so that the level of discussion and the public comment that will happen at the regular board meeting on February 15th will be as it always was, which is public comment at the beginning of the meeting and then public comment prior to any vote is taken. So That's the process there.
Okay, sorry.
No, I appreciate your saying that, because otherwise somebody might be wondering what our process is. So regarding the resident, non-resident policy, as I'm guessing will come as no surprise to my fellow policy members, the board was all over the place. I just kind of threw out there before we invest a tremendous amount of time in this, what is the feeling out there? And so there was certainly interest. I probably was and remain the most ardently interested in pursuing this as a possibility and putting something into action. But from myself, it ran the gamut. So there was nothing that I can bring back to you to say definitively, this is a go, let's craft the language for a policy that will, like, I still don't know. And so I remain cautious, acknowledging my own interest in the policy, to have it as something that is, having done the research, I was actually surprised that, and now I don't have that research in front of me, but what I presented to the board, that virtually all Durg-based schools offer this. The vast majority of Fairfield County schools offer this. And Ms. Laborious, I don't know if this is, I'm sorry, I happen to notice you nodding your head. So I don't know if this is something you could speak more to.
Just
Or if
one
you had
thing.
anything additional to offer.
Oh, I'm just in agreement. Yeah, a lot of the DERGs do, and schools within our DERG, I'm sorry, and also in Fairfield County. I agree. And Mr. Cummings did a survey of superintendents and then provided some of that information to you. And I did a survey of my CASBO colleagues, and they conferred. It's a little bit disparate, as you see in what we presented to you. The percent that people charge, or districts charge,
Right.
I apologize. But the general rules apply. And yes, most districts do this in some form or fashion.
So that leaves me with wondering about our direction. And one thing I was thinking to run past the two of you, little turnaround is fair play in my book. What would you think of charging the finance committee, requesting that it go on their agenda to work out the language to be then inserted in ours? Now, here's the hard part. On the assumption that we are going to bring something forward. Now, again, that does not mean it's necessarily passing the full board. We can never guarantee that in policy. It's either that, or we go ahead and do all the language except for the finance part, and then come back to them and say, we're ready to go. Can you now please start crafting yours? Because we can't do what we're doing with the grading policy. With the grading policy, we pulled together a very solid actual first draft, and now we're waiting for staff input. We can't do that same thing with this.
No.
And
Yeah, I don't know
Go
if
ahead,
we could be going on, on simultaneous tracks here. Like we asked, there's interest. So, okay, send that piece off, send them the sample, maybe with big circle around where their part is or whatever. They can be working on that while we're working on the other language. I mean, it's really going to be like a cut and paste from them into this policy.
Yep. No, that's not, again, I was kind of
Yeah,
thinking.
they don't need our language on the rest of it
No, they do not.
to do the finance piece.
They don't.
I do have a question on the finance piece though, before we send it over to them.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, just, I know we're gonna get into it's a very, very long thing here.
Yeah.
But the one where there was an example of the tuition payment with all of, I'll tell you what page 48.
I was only up to 46. Damn.
48.
Yep.
I understand why certain things were taken out here. My only question is,
Are you talking about the part that's in black?
yes,
Okay, so that might, because obviously we did not produce any of that. So there's this, I just want to know if Ms. Laborious should be paying attention.
this is what they'll obviously end up working on. And there's a ton of examples that they're gonna get from other districts that do it all sorts of different ways.
Yep.
But just so that there's, you know, this example in here is my only question on it, and it's not going to end up being me because it'll be finance, but the enrollment had 9624, and I'm wondering when we give this to finance, it should be very clear what we're talking about because we don't have 9624 in seats. We have like 9310 in seats.
Good point. Yeah. So, net per pupil, this is the published part of the, I think, ED 001. 9624 was the enrollment. I don't know the date. Was it FY?
So like
Yeah,
our
it's
October
in-
1st, like our October 1 count, you know, our official
Yeah.
PSIS, whatever. I mean, I don't
Mhm.
know if this included maybe outplacements and magnets and, you know, the total bucket of
Right.
field responsibility, which is not necessarily a seat provision.
So it should be refined to reflect the real cost of the seat.
Yeah, I
understand
think
what
it
you're
would
saying.
probably be a lower enrollment count and a little bit higher if they go with this 30%, whatever it may be. Just want to make sure that they understand what formulas and what definitions they're using when they do get it. And then again, at the end, there's up teen different ways districts are doing this calculation. So
Yeah.
I leave it to them. So just as we, sorry, Jen, just to be clear, I just wanted to, if we're going to do it that way, that they really know the terms and what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you. And what I'd propose that we do, if we do bring that to finance, is just put it into a same format. So you see option 1, option 2, option 3, and then term definitions for the options. So it'll be easier for them to review than sort of what we have now.
Right.
Okay.
That's all I had to say on that. So I'm sorry, Jen, back
Nope.
to the beginning.
That's quite all right. So in Carol, and please obviously feel free to jump in. So I guess because as we look at future items, I think this is the window where we have time because grading is not ready to come back to us. And I do also want to take on that fundraising. So I think it's,
Can we talk about, are we not editing today?
I didn't think we were editing today because first I wanted to kind of lay out some of the issues to get your feedback.
Okay.
And also because fundraising involves Mrs. Laborious again, who has been a little bit busy. So I did not think it was right to ask her to bring us language for today. So otherwise we might have been looking at language, but this was not the time to make that request.
But we have language in our packet.
Language changes.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt. We did provide, we wanted to make sure that we provided some draft policy language around booster clubs and fundraising. And also Ms. Laborious has been able to do a little research that she can share with us, you know, to the idea of like, I think what we were hoping to do is get direction, share that with you and then get direction from the policy committee on what policies were next on the radar and the work we can do prior to the next policy meeting to meet those expectations.
Okay, so it sounds like I'm going to turn it over. The one thing I would say just immediately, Mr. Cummings, while you're here, regarding future items, what's always been on our back burner has been waiting for the more direction and language from the state regarding those policies that we have to change by June 30th. So let me just, before we get to even discussing these, do we know anything more about those yet? Because I can't remember. I think it was 5 of them. You know, it was a number of the gifted, the challenging curriculum, the FAFSA. I don't remember the other.
Yeah, the reading.
Reading. Do we have any idea of any timeline to meet their requirement of June 30th?
I'm going to ask Dr. Savanchanza because he's my in-house legislative expert to.
He looks like he welcomes that title.
I went on the model policies just last week to see if anything came up about them, and nothing has been up about any of these at this point, including the gifted, challenging curriculum, or advanced coursework, which are the 3 that I looked for. I know reading's not on here, which we could work with if necessary, because that one's a little more clear than some of the other ones, what their intent was. So no update at this point in terms of their expectations through model policies.
I mean, at the pace they're moving, we may have to add special meetings just to accommodate something that they, yeah. I mean, I'm all for sometimes putting out the aggressive thing out there and then figuring out a way to meet it, but this is getting a little ridiculous. But okay, so we are not ready to move on those, knowing that we are going to have to drop everything the moment that stuff comes forward, because we do have a deadline, and I don't want to put it on. I would prefer to not put it on the board in June, in case that there are questions or there's any controversy about it. But in the meantime, we have an open window right now. And likewise, when grading comes back, these things get postponed. So I guess then first, so the non-resident, I will, cede to Mrs. Jacobson's point, and I will be in touch with the Finance Committee chairperson to see about their willingness and the room on their agenda to begin to tackle theirs, because I also do believe their piece is a little bit shorter in the extent of the conversation. The one other thing, and maybe someone can refresh my memory if we got confirmation of this, but we had been concerned about the SPED costs, and that we can't quite call it the sending district because they're not sending them. I guess it's the home district. Do we have the assurance that they would be the ones responsible for that? Because that, I know other districts have that in their policy language, but that doesn't mean it would have the force of law behind it. So, Ms. Laborious, is that something you have any greater insight on? Because that, I think, with this board, and fair enough, would be a non-starter if we don't have that assurance.
So that was a concern when I was reading through the detail. I don't have more information on that. I can reach out to colleagues and we can have that conversation with our legal counsel. Also, Mr. Cummings, I believe that we might want to ask just to ensure that, because that's a big question, especially with the language about who handles the IEP. So not just the financial consideration, but the evaluations and the IEP are all involved in that piece, It
needs to go through finance too, because it's not only the special ed cost, but at what pickup point. So there's different examples in here that it starts above the tuition amount, that it starts anything above our PPE, like at what pickup point does that pick up? So is it zero? So again, different options for finance to look at in terms of when that pickup point becomes.
Right.
So,
yeah.
I was just say, so Mr. Cummings, while the policy committee is not in a position to charge your staff with anything, only you can do that. We would put to you that we would need an answer to that, whoever gets it, prior to our bringing it back on our agenda. Because again, I do think I can read the board well enough to know that would make this a non-starter.
Yes, absolutely. We can do that. And I would agree. I think this goes nowhere with that issue, without that issue resolved.
So I will follow up with you, or if you get it sooner than I expect, and you can get back to me, because I'm going to update Mr. Peterson that this conversation has taken place. But I agree with Mrs. Jacobson. They need more information before they could start to do this as well.
Okay.
Okay.
I know Mike has to leave at 6:30, and I really want to be able to give him any input on this booster policy.
Yes. Yep. No, we're moving to it right now.
Okay.
I don't know if I need to give any background or if you just want to launch into a description of this, because we have you for 5 minutes.
No, I can jump on this. Essentially, I know that the board has looked at this issue, the booster policy, and we had conversations with the board earlier in the fall about that we were actually more confronted right now with issues around the donation process, the school gifting process. We have a gift policy in there, but it's not broad enough to cover some of the issues that we've confronted, particularly as it addresses issues around equity across the school system. I've spoken to Mr. Papa George about some of the things that are gifted to us now require investments in maintenance and facility upgrade, and at some point are going to have to be replaced. So they ultimately wind up on the board's bottom line for budget. So it struck us that as we were starting to talk about these issues, that if the policy committee would consider a broader look at some of this. And I know that there are districts that have addressed these issues. So that's essentially the background on where we were. As I said, back in the fall, I did talk to Ms. Laborious about this, and I know in Mr. Budget presentation, she had some time to do a little work around this, and perhaps she can speak further to that.
Yeah. So we looked at other districts. Essentially, it's around the process for evaluating, like setting up the rules around what requires the superintendent approval. So our current policy says that any gift would go through the superintendent. Then we would set up the rules that and who would do the evaluation, looking at it from the equity lens, and then the cost of maintenance, and then how frequently. Like right now, it says that we'd present it to the board in June. Other districts present to the board more frequently. You know, we might want to consider a more frequent presenting of the gifts. Some districts have the board sign off on gifts above $1,000 before receipt. So there's different options that we can look at as we craft this policy. I know that the specific concern is around equity, particularly around the Booster Club, but also in general, from what I can gather from seeing the write-up about the Booster Clubs.
Yes, that definitely was a primary concern. I actually hadn't, when we were first dealing with the issue of equity, I didn't realize the even larger issue that things are being gifted that could then fall back on the board, which obviously needs to be part of this conversation and stipulations and directives out to the community. So that is an additional good reminder. So I don't know if Jen or Carol, if you have any comments on 1230 or on 3280, but these are both policies I'm keenly interested in our moving forward with our discussion. I'm not sure how comfortable I am doing too much of this conversation without Mr. Cummings here. But if you're ready with anything, I'm happy to, at least make note of the issues that you see, the concerns that you have, so that we're ready to really tackle it come March. Jenna, were you raising your hand?
I was, yeah.
Go ahead.
So I think that for the gifting one, that's just what we have right now. And there's no change there proposed. So
Correct.
There's nothing in there. I'm really looking at this booster one. I don't know where some of this came with, but it's titled Booster Club, but it really commingles in a lot of places, quote unquote, parent organizations and booster clubs, but it's just called Booster Club. So I was really confused on this policy about who this actually pertains to. If it's just booster clubs, then it should just be booster clubs, not parent organizations, because I don't really know what parent organizations means. Is that PTA? So I was a little confused on the title to the content. And I know we're not going to get into language right now, Jen, nor do I think we should. I think that we should just put what we think out here, but some of the language in here, I think could actually make things worse rather than better. And I don't want to get specific on it right now, but just to give you some idea of some of my concerns as we tackle this going forward, that I think that this could actually just create an even worse situation.
We don't want that. All right, I'm looking for something as well, because we did have something specific to PTA, but Carol, did you want to jump in at all?
I'm sure. I share some of Jen's concerns. I just, I'm wondering, like, what is the problem we're solving here? Because, I mean, clearly our parent organizations do so much for schools, and a lot of this language could really stifle or be dangerous in terms of preventing or restricting them from doing their good work. So that's kind of the lens that I'm using when I'm reading it. So I think that's, just basically that I'm sharing Jen's concerns on that.
I mean, if there's a specific issue, let's deal with the specific issue rather than try to draft a broad policy that keeps like Friday night pasta dinners from needing an approval and like what's going to happen with that money. So I just, if there's an issue, let's identify the issue and work on that, because this seems really, really problematic actually in some ways.
All right, so while we're not going to go forward with language amendment changes, I would appreciate, both for my sake, so I know where to focus my lens more, as well as for staff, if there was something that they had a specific reason for including it. Can you give us the specifics then of, again, not looking for language changes, not looking to do any striking or adding at this time, but if you can be more specific, again, 3280, I'm definitely interested in beefing that up. That's for the gifts, grants, and bequests. But leaving that one alone for right now, in 1230, if you could be more specific, just going by page number on problematic language. Again, not looking to solve it right now, just identify it.
Me, like you want me to right now?
Sure.
I'm going to work from the
And this
bottom.
does not, just you could, this does not limit you, but at
Yeah.
least gives us a few areas to look at.
Okay, so it's really hard on all these computers. I like when we're in our little table or our little
Yeah.
booth. But I'm just going to work my way up backwards. 64, when it says necessary expenditures must be provided by the Board of Ed through its approved budget. Well, we know that that's not necessarily the case. And number 2, the sentence that says items that would be nice or beneficial, like how do you define necessary, nice, beneficial, etc.? I had some, concerns about that. And Carol, if you already have your places, jump in because I'm going to have to scroll to find them right now. But it has to do with earmarking the funds for a certain thing. So careful consideration should be given to the total value of the contribution to all students and not just to specific student groups. That's also on top of 64. And I think that could be problematic when you're trying to do something for a certain school population, like a special ed item. Or something for, a music group or something for a teacher appreciation. I mean, that's not that teacher appreciation is student group, but you guys know what I'm saying. Like,
Yep.
There are a lot of things that get done that aren't necessarily for everyone, and that, there's 5th grade ceremony, there's whatever, like,
Yep.
it's so, okay, so that language, I didn't really,
Nor does it indicate what careful consideration means.
right.
What's okay, we considered it, so.
Well, right, that's the problem with this thing is there's no what's the rubric by which this
Yeah, there's a process
evaluation is
for it.
happening,
Yeah.
to
Can I-
make sure
can I
that
jump
one,
Wait,
yeah.
Jen, hold on 1 second. Carol?
I was just going to jump in when we're talking about total value. I mean, for me, when I think about the issues related to booster clubs, it's almost like there's a dollar amount threshold for like feeling comfortable. So, I mean, that doesn't address that at all here. And I mean, I don't know if that's something that would go into the gift policy, but in terms of us trying to restrict what an organization's purpose or name, or I mean, I just think it's just way overreach. And for these, I mean, a lot of these are 50c3 organizations that we're talking about, not just the booster clubs that collect, $20, but the PTAs. I mean, they have established structures, so it feels like maybe not respectful of that.
Okay, I'll keep going.
Thank you.
Can I just one quick backup? Because with the title booster clubs, and I know that it then probably says parent organizations and booster clubs, but it was my understanding that this was geared towards athletic or extracurricular booster clubs, and that issues of PTA are a separate category to be handled in the other policy. But and I'm not saying that the language then tells you that, but the title is what I was solely going by. So I don't know because I'm not positive who did this crafting, if it was Ms. Laborious or somebody else on staff who crafted this. And crafting probably, stealing and using stuff from other policies because that's what we do. But was this intended to be of the athletic extracurricular nature, or was this intended also to apply to PTAs?
I'm not sure who put this together.
Jen, Courtney, can I jump in for a second?
Mhm.
I just sent Jenna a message through chat. I guess she didn't see it.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. This is just a starting point. It came from the CABE policy.
Okay, thank you.
Just as a starting point, because we had nothing to go on. So before Colleen went on leave, she said if I ever needed to look for a policy as a starting point to reference
Thank
CABE.
you.
So again, the language most definitely needs to be changed. So it's just a starting point.
I
And
do
what-
apologize because Mike had mentioned this would
That's
be
okay.
for the next meeting, but because I wanted to hear your feedback about what you wanted to focus on. And so this is helpful for me to hear the conversation reacting to the CABE policy, which I agree is vague and
Yeah, I mean, and I could argue that you could see, if it's going to end up being just boosters and as it pertains to athletics, making sure we're not creating a discrepancy between PTAs and boosters then with like being overly allowance on the PTA side and under allowance on the booster side. And then the same kind of issues with different schools having different abilities would also equally apply to the booster club. So, you know, not being too constrictive there either. So anyway, if you're taking the broad 40,000 feedback, Courtney, you know, it's this I think is really, really, hey, we don't have the policies for a reason because it's really hard to do this.
Yeah.
Just putting it out there. So anyway, there's a few other lines in here, Jen, that's are pretty prescriptive about, you know, you're not going to be able to earmark it for anything. Then we already know what the issue will be. Well, then I'm not going to raise the money that way. Thank you.
Yep.
I'll go a different direction. So just, I thought that's all I have to say on that right now.
Carol, anything else?
I think that was a good starting point. Thank you.
And I appreciate that, you know, again, that we're not having this as simply a discussion, but we did actually have something to look at. And it's, now we have a balancing act of what I would consider to be, I think it's 4 buckets at this point to tackle for this spring. There's grading, which I'm not pushing a timeline on Mike for that, but which will be coming back at some point. Because we haven't moved it anywhere yet. We haven't even voted on it yet. So grading is out there. The bucket of, I'll just call them the state statute mandated ones, is out there. The non-resident policy is out there. And then these 2, because I think Jen raises a really important point, that while I've been viewing these as 2 separate, the second one as being more related to PTA and the booster clubs relating to extracurricular and sports, I think Jen raises a very good point that there should, however, be commonality in terms, to a degree and where appropriate, of the expectations for the 2. So it does make sense to do them as a pair. So which one is on our next agenda? I can't say for sure just yet because a lot's going to depend on other things. But
Jen,
this
can I
will
ask
be, we do at least have a month. Jen?
grading.
Yeah?
I know everyone's really busy. It's been like 9 months.
No,
lot of
no,
just-
it's been
Yeah.
a month.
No, since we gave a thing, but it's been a conversation since last June. I get that we had to put together the language. It's just, can we move this baby along?
Well, what it was waiting on is the staff was told to stop. So they haven't this is not, of all of the PD time that they have, this has not been a focus because just like we didn't move ahead when we thought they were, they had the brakes put on them while we finally said, okay, policy has to stay with us. So I'm not saying people don't have thoughts, but they were not charged with bringing anything forward. And I'm just going to guess here that in January with the first midterms or big exams in a year and a half, I don't know how much they've met with it yet. That said, fair point, you know, that I'll ask Mr. Cummings, we do need to put a date on them. So we're a little bit more certain. I'm kind of thinking that maybe getting it back by April. Actually, I don't know, Dr. Zavajanzik, if you have a sense of how the high schools and the middle schools are allocating or recruiting their staff time. But do you think having this back, the grading policy, the grading regs back by April is a reasonable ask or sooner? But
So I know we are working on it with the level groups coming up in the next week and then in the next month. So I don't think that would be a problem, but I don't want to get ahead of Mr. Cummings either in terms of his timeline. It is on the agendas coming up though to move forward with it.
okay, so I'm just, and I know you will, but I will formally follow up with him as well that we are hoping to begin to tackle it finally to move to the board as of April.
Understood. I can relay that message as well.
Okay. And look, if it got done sooner, it's not like the language couldn't be read by us, you know, if it came to us mid-March or something. And again, I am looking at the possibility we may need to add a special meeting because of that state bucket. But okay, so anything else, Jen? Okay. So so I just wanted to kind of characterize what we have coming up. So I'm gonna have to be speaking with Mike as well about where we are with the non-resident and those assurances that we are looking for before anyone moves forward anything. Because if we find out we can't, well, that path got, that's a quick path. But if we do have some assurances, then we will move forward. And again, but regardless, I will update Mr. Peterson. So I'm guessing that next meeting will be a full focus on booster clubs and gifts, is my thought process at this point. Yeah, so that's where we are right now. And just looking if there's anything else on the list. No. So I'm ready to go to public comment next, but is there anything else anyone needs to throw out there? All right.
Could I just ask a quick clarifying question? I know it goes through the superintendent, but were I to come up with some draft language, would I share that through the superintendent to you? Is that, I apologize that I'm not sure how this works in policy committee.
That would be perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, now I'm at the point where I don't know what to do. I assume Marco was on the line. I don't know how to handle the public
Yes.
comments.
So we only have one individual still on the line. So I can, whatever you'd like, I can unmute them.
Yes, please do. Hello? Is there a name I should be saying?
This is Jonah Hoffman. She's not.
Joanna?
She might have stepped away.
Okay.
The other two individuals are not on the line anymore.
Okay. Again, just as we wait to see if Joanna comes back, a reminder that nothing we did has been made official yet. Anything that we did here in policy is just to move it forward to the full board for February 15th. And assume if the public comment, if anyone interested in the public comment was commenting on the C19 policies, that is what is coming before the full board on February 15th. If your comments are about anything else that was on the agenda, as you can tell, we are in a very early stage with all of that. But certainly if the public has any interest or any suggestions about any of those other topics we've discussed today, in terms of the instruction general, the non-resident policy, resident, non-resident policy, the booster clubs fundraising, and the gifts, grants, and bequests, we would certainly welcome an email about that or speaking. Joanna Hoffman? Oh dear.
Try it again.
Hi, can you hear
here we
me?
go.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, okay, sorry, Jonna Hoffman, 2120 Bronson Road. I had a question. I had something else to say, but I just wanted to know, and I know Mike isn't on the call anymore, but who is part of the transition committee? And where did those people come from? Is there a way for us to volunteer, or do you know where that committee came from? Because I'm a PTA president at Dwight, and I know that in the last meeting he said there was PTA presidents that he had spoken to, and I know I've talked to at least 4 out of the 10 elementary schools, and none of them had been contacted. So I just wanted to know who's on these committees, who's being spoken, who he's asking. Does anybody know?
Okay. I'm going to actually answer you, but just, obviously normally at board meetings, the public comment is just for you to comment. However, I think your question presents us with a great opportunity to perhaps forestall a whole lot of emails. So I think it's good to answer it. But before I do address that, is there anything else that you wanted to say? Because what I can't set up here is a give and take, because I think it would be inappropriate of me to do so.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just, on a personal point, I appreciate, and I know a lot of my friends went to the meeting in person last week, and I unfortunately couldn't be there in support of the unmasking. And I just personally want to say we're from New Canaan. My husband and I grew up in Connecticut. We actually moved mid-COVID from Naples, Florida, where it was quote unquote the land of the free, because we wanted to raise our kids up here the way that we were. And right now, this is not how we want our kids to be raised. So it's the best place that we grew up, and it's just really sad to see what is happening to our children. And just today, my daughter, my first grader, came home and said that, she can't talk at snack because when she takes her mask down, spit comes out of her mouth and will make her friends and her teachers sick. And it's just appalling and disgusting. And I just pray that you guys support everybody in this movement that has taken a big part of Connecticut when you go up to Hartford and just speak on our behalf for our children, because it's just got to stop. And that's all I have to say about that. And then I just want the answer to the transition committee.
Okay, so thank you.
Yep.
So a few points. So the idea of the committee, and I don't believe, to your first point about PTA presence, I heard, and maybe Mrs. Jacobson and Mrs. Guernsey can correct me, what I heard Mr. Cummings say was PTA council. I don't believe he said PTA, Dr. Parrish?
Yeah.
Zakia Parrish, Executive Director of Operations and Processes. What it was a PTA brown bag to present the budget. So they were invited through, PTA presidents were invited to attend that board presentation. And the invite came out through PTA Council.
And it was at that brown bag lunch that the topic came up of seeking parent volunteers?
That was where it was initially discussed. And then
Okay.
there was further discussion, of course, at the board table.
Okay, so thank you. So it did come up at the last board meeting when I raised the issue of, forming a task force or raised the issue of a transition plan. I followed up with Mr. Cummings that weekend. He completely agreed with me that it was important to get multiple stakeholder input, and parents being a very, very important voice among that. We do hear the parents. We have heard it loud and clear at our meetings. We are looking to get that voice. At this point, I know I've heard of a number of people interested in volunteering. So I would simply suggest that you email to Mr. Cummings your interest in that. I don't know, and Dr. Parrish, I'm guessing you don't know, but if I'm wrong, correct me, please, that you don't know how it's going to be selected, because I don't believe what this is going to turn into is a committee of 50, which would not be very effective. But one very important piece that Mr. Cummings said when he was in the meeting is the notion that whoever the parents are in the committee, something he is very specifically interested in charging them with is bringing to that meeting additional feedback. That is how it is funneling through the parents, that will get as much of this feedback as possible. And this is obviously with an eye toward having the smoothest transition possible to support our students and to stop using the language of fear, which I feel comfortable saying that is something we have to move away from. So that, just addressing that idea of the committee makeup and how that will happen. Jen, I thought I'd seen your hand go up. Did you want to add something?
And I know we're not supposed to get back at public comment, and pardon to the person on the call. I just also want to warn, this isn't a 9-month committee process, like reopening, right? I mean, the light switch was turned off. We got to turn the light switch back on. And I understand getting input and having a transition plan, but I really am hoping this isn't turning into a reopening committee 9 months to figure out how to put the light switch back on. So just my input on that, right?
No, and that's, I'll just kind of piggyback on that. That was exactly my point to Mr. Cummings, is that we have to be ready for February 15th. So this has to be something, well, obviously he's already referenced that this is coming up tomorrow, and then pulling on these volunteers. And I will also give him, a reminder of this feedback, which I'm sure he's getting by email anyway, but just, it would be great for maybe even to be official about who's involved in this, so people will know what parents to possibly reach out to for feedback, what is the forum for that, for gathering that information, so that no parent feels that their voice isn't being heard, or that they're having to rely on social media to do their sharing and not knowing who's reading that either. So yeah, it has to be ready for February 15th. it may turn out to take longer than that, and I'm hoping that is not the case. And I also, one other portion of that public comment is that we are, as a board, there has been a meeting with the Fairfield State delegation. This advocacy has taken place. These views were shared pretty unambiguously with the Fairfield delegation. And so I think that responds to all of the points. And Marco, I assume the other two callers did not come on?
They did not, no.
Okay. So so that said, I believe we're ready to adjourn if there's nothing else. Okay. All right. So thank you very much. And 6:52, we are adjourned, and I will see you all next week.